Hi, this is Adam Eliel Berkowitz from Israel 365 News, coming at you live from the Golan. We have an amazing guest today, Dr. Rivka Adler. She's an educator, a freelance journalist. She specializes in Jewish and Israeli content, and she also is the author of 10 from the Nations, a Torah awakening among non-Jews. And she has a book coming up called Lighting Up the Nations. Her specialty is actually what she calls geula. And Rivka, if you could give us the quick one line definition of what geula is, I think that'll help our listeners.
The one-line definition: geula is the ultimate redemption of the world. It is the next phase of of life as we know it, that the Jewish people have been waiting for forever.
Oh, so it's not just a Jewish thing.
Oh, definitely not. No, geula is the redemption of the whole world.
Wow. Okay, that's important to know. Okay, so you came up, your first book was about connections between Jews and non-Jews about over Torah, and that's actually, I don't know if our readers are aware, if our listeners are aware of this, but that's a really controversial subject. So I want to know, how did you come up with an idea of the first book and the second book about non-Jews connecting to the Torah?
So before I started actually working in this area, I had no idea that there were non-Jewish people that had any knowledge of Torah or any interest in Torah. But after I started getting involved in this, I met them, and they would come to Israel and tell me their stories. And I thought, there's a bigger story here going on, that as a Jewish person, I had no idea all through my life that there were Christians who shared an interest in Torah, that who studied Parsha, who were careful to not eat certain things because the Bible says you're not supposed to eat certain things, who have some semblance of Shabbat that may not look exactly like Shabbat in my home, but they have a Shabbat experience sometime Friday night or on Shabbat during the day. They were doing all of these things and telling me their story of how the Bible motivated them. And I thought, I'm a Jewish person. I never heard of this, and maybe other people have never heard of it either. And so I published 10 from the Nations.
Dr. Adler, this shouldn't be confused with Messianic Judaism. Or could you just explain?
Yes, sure. So
because they also have in their prayer services a lot of Hebrew, and they have Shabbat, and they do a lot of the things you just mentioned.
Correct. So I think the fundamental distinction is their relationship with the Jewish people, and whether they have a missionizing agenda to the Jewish people or have a cooperative agenda with the Jewish people. So the people that wrote their stories in 10 from the Nations are people who, to the best of my ability to vet them, have moved away from what is known as replacement theology, the idea that Christianity replaces Judaism, and they have a very respectful and even loving relationship with the Jewish people, and no desire to missionize. So they're coming to the Jewish people. The title of the book, 10 from the Nations, comes from a verse in the book of Zechariah, chapter 8, verse 23, that speaks about how at the end of days, in the period that I believe we're living in now, that people from all over the world would turn to the Jewish people, I'm paraphrasing, and say, we want to understand what you understand about God, and we want to learn from you. Take us with you. We want to cling to you. And that's the process that I described in 10 from the Nations. I think the messianic part of the community is actually very dangerous to the Jewish community and people from whom I try to distance myself. Great question.
Yeah, I want to say that you used a word that I think is really key here. That it's a cooperative relationship, because there are a lot of Jews, and I think historically, rightfully so, are a bit hesitant, a little bit reticent, because there is a difficult history between Christianity and Judaism, in which mostly Christians are trying to convert Jews. And so the way you described it, it's cooperative. So are you trying to convert the Christians?
Oh my goodness, no.
Okay.
My vision, and I think this is pretty traditional in Jewish thinking, is the whole world does not need to become Jewish. That isn't in any way a goal here. However, the Torah, which was given to the Jewish people in order to hold and protect it and nurture it and love it and learn it until such time as the rest of the world was ready to accept the teachings that are universal, the teachings that God put into the Torah that are intended for all of humanity. But we have had a 2,000-year long kind of bloody history, not just trying to convert us, but trying to kill us and kick us out of their countries and so forth. And people from the Christian side some are beginning to come out of that, come out of this replacement theology, come out of this idea that the Jews don't matter in God's eyes anymore. Quite the opposite. And they understand and respectfully relate to us in such a way that we as Jewish people have something to share with them, something godly to share with them. And there are people all over the world who, for whom maybe this is what they always believed, or this is a new understanding for them, but they are coming to the Jewish people kind of with their hands out and saying, please teach me, please show me. And that is a shift that is happening in the non-Jewish world, and it's happening in the Jewish world, in the people who are waking up from the Jewish side and saying, this is what it means to be a light to the nations. I never understood that before. And that's where the new volume comes in.
To be perfectly honest, it's funny, you gave me questions that you wanted me to ask, but even though we speak all the time, I'd love to get your opinion on some of these things. Is this even permitted within the Jewish religion to connect to non-Jews in this way?
I would say not only permitted, but it is part of the mandate that God gave us. Now, there are boundaries, and there are things that are permitted and things that are not permitted, but a lot of Jewish people, I think, have a wholesale misunderstanding that we are not allowed to say or teach anything from our Torah to anybody who isn't Jewish unless they're in the process of converting. And that's actually not true. Now, obviously, there's a range of rabbinic opinions on this, but those that are very strict about it are strict in the interest of protecting the Jewish people from missionizing or attempts to missionize and so forth. But what I'm reflecting on, or what I'm trying to amplify, is the movement in the world of people with a Christian background who are recognizing that all of those millennia of replacement theology is wrong. That, as it says in Jeremiah, that we were taught lies. Our fathers taught us lies about the Jewish people, and they are trying now to come in humility and with an open heart and an open mind to the Jewish people, and to say, teach us what we don't know about the Bible. Teach us what the Jewish people know. So in my case, I have met a few times with a rabbi who gave me guidance about what I may and may not do. And I think that any Jew who's going to be involved in this ought to have guidelines and clarity about what is permitted. But we are so close to the end of days that the necessity to share the universal wisdom of Torah is becoming stronger and stronger in the world. And that's what that's the message I'm trying to amplify with this book and the new one coming.
I think also what you're doing is incredibly cutting edge. I'm sorry, do I have an echo?
Yes,
I
you do.
apologize. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Let me ask a question while you fix that.
Sure.
So how do you see the translation of the Bible being a sign, a day of mourning for the Jewish people, that it was translated into 70 different languages, and as when it was propagated throughout the nations so had access for the first time to the Bible? How do you see that whole teaching, that it actually we frowned upon the fact that it was translated to the other nations.
Okay, so I have two answers for that. One, as you well know,
I
is
figured you would.
that as you well know, that studying the Bible in Hebrew is the only way to accurately get the messages from the Bible. And that's one of the really critical reasons why non-Jews need Jewish teachers, because their translations are often, I'm going to say, inaccurate in certain very important places.
You might even say intentionally misleading.
You might even say that. And that is the sort of the second answer. And that is that at a time when people are, in the past, at a time when people were looking at the Bible in order to bolster their own perspective on things, it's much easier in translation, because every translation is an interpretation. It's much easier in translation to skew a verse or many verses. So I think that.
So it wasn't a problem of access; it was a problem of translation, mistranslation.
That is my mistranslation. That is my opinion. But also the times are different now. Again, we started out talking about Geula, and part of Geula, and one of the chapters that I'm working on is this idea of the universal recognition of the God of Israel, which is all over Tanakh. It's all over the Hebrew Bible. And the chapter that I'm working on is to show Jewish people that this message is from God, that God wants the entire world to recognize him as the God over the entire world. And he put all kinds of clues in the Bible in Hebrew. And it's up to the Jewish people to be the transmitters of that message to the rest of the world. Because how is the rest of the world supposed to know that if it's tucked into a Bible that nobody else can access?
So, Rivka, I'd like to emphasize, I don't know if our listeners are aware of this, but you're actually really dealing with cutting edge issues that are being dealt with in a way that they have never, ever been dealt with before. That we've never had this kind of cooperative relationship between Judaism and Christianity. Very much not. So this is something that's brand new, and it's kind of like my impression is disparate people are coming in from all over, all of them driven by their own their own voice, their own light, and all headed towards the same place. So your books very much are trying to, the first book, 10 from the Nations, was very much just individuals telling their stories, which I think was very important, because there's no organizations yet that, or at least not on a large scale, working to bring people together. Also, what you're doing is not, and what we're doing is not interfaith. Interfaith is people coming together. It's kind of like, crunchy, chewy, we're all the same, and we're not. It's very much, we are very different. Each person has to bring their own light. So in your new book, what kind of topics are you dealing with?
So after dealing with 10 from the Nations and recognizing that for most people, like you said, this is cutting edge and most Jews have not considered this, I thought that it was important for Jews to have a deeper understanding of what our ultimate mission is. Thank you. That's the cover of the first book. A deeper understanding of what our mission is to the rest of the world. And so right now, I want to include the concept, as I mentioned to you, the universal recognition of God in the Hebrew scriptures and in Jewish prayer, vital Jewish lessons for the nations, vital lessons from Kabbalah and Chassidut that Jews are meant to teach the world, the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. Yeah. And then I have 2 case studies, I would call them, of places where Jews are teaching Torah to the rest of the world, one with Dr. Yair Yehuda and one with Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel. Then I also have a chapter on, it's a commentary on Isaiah chapter 49, verse 23, about the concept of redemptive servitude. What does it mean that the nations will serve Israel in the future? Working on a chapter on how the Jewish people can prepare for the return of the 10 lost tribes, what that means, what the concept of Ger Toshav means, and how the third temple will relate not just to the Jewish people, but also to the nation. So those are the chapters that I'm working on at this stage.
So just a little bit of clarification. The 7 Noahide laws, if there's one concept that I feel that my Christian readers entirely misunderstand, it's the Noahide laws. I think that there was a lot of bad press given to the Noahide laws, so that there's a pushback and a resistance that comes from a misunderstanding. That's my personal opinion. Also, you mentioned Ger Toshav. Ger Toshav is a biblical concept. How would you translate it?
Talmudic concept. It's really more of a Talmudic concept. It's a very, very nuanced term. And that's actually what the chapter talks about is a lot of Jews misunderstand the concept of ger, because if you ask your average, relatively educated Jew, what is a ger, they'll tell you it's a convert. But I think I would recommend that people read the chapter instead of me trying to explain it, because it is a category in Jewish law for a righteous Gentile who is not a Jew and doesn't want to be a Jew, because the path of conversion for right now is open to people. But some people choose to be close to the Torah's guidelines for righteous Gentiles, living as a righteous Gentile ought to live as best that they can. It isn't even a category that applies right now because we have no recognized Sanhedrin, and it is necessary for Sanhedrin to recognize a non-Jew as a Ger Toshav. It's a very, very complicated status, but it's a status most Jews don't have any idea about, that there could be somebody who could be in alignment with the Torah perspective without actually being a Jew.
But it's also a convert.
No,
Sometimes
not a Ger Toshav.
No, when the Torah uses the word ger, it could refer to a Ger Toshav, or it could refer to a Ger Tzedek, which is a convert. So that word has two meanings to it.
That's what I'm saying, is that the chapter is all about how that concept and that relationship is a nuanced one.
We're being asked, what are the Noahide laws? I'm going to put that up for people that
what
don't
about
know.
Okay.
Okay.
I put them up, but I want to point out that none of these are specifically, they each have a verse in Genesis that is their basis, and they're incumbent on all of mankind. And if you look at these, there's not really anything that a normal person should object to, in my humble opinion. And most, I can see that it should also be.
They're a lot more complicated than those are the outlines of seven laws which go on and on, just like our laws.
Right. Yeah. You might want to bring somebody on who is more fluent in these. And
Rabbi Schulman or something from
or Rabbi Sherky, or that's it's as it was pointed out. Yes, they are much more complicated than those one line explanations, but it is, I think, something even in their essence, something that most people would not object to, and it's incumbent on all of mankind.
If I may say so. So the book that I'm working on now, Lighting Up the Nations, is an opportunity for Jews to better understand that there are universal messages embedded in our Torah that are intended for all of humanity. So the Noahide laws, I don't want to get stuck on that point, but the Noahide laws are among them. It's sort of a general morality for mankind. But there are all
what is referred to as Judeo-Christian doctrine?
I'm not an expert on that term, so I can't answer that. I'm speaking. This book is written from the perspective of a Jew of Jews, because I'm not the only one writing in it, of Jews regarding what Jews need to understand about what the Torah says that is relevant to the rest of the world. Just that concept that the Torah has universal messages for the rest of the world, I think is already a paradigm shift for most Jewish people who are used to thinking of the Torah as our exclusive personal property. And
Absolutely, without a doubt. So I have a quick question. You're an American who made Aliyah. You live in Israel. This paradigm shift, it's not only is it a paradigm shift, it's a shift 180 degrees from 2,000 years of history, 2,000 years of relations between Jews and Christians. And most of I think all of the Christians who I've connected with who are interested in this type of connection, this cooperative relationship with Jews, they're also incredibly pro-Israel. How do you think Israel fits into this? Also, a lot of Jews would say Israel is not relevant to Christians. How do you think the existence of Israel affected this paradigm shift for Jews, and how did it affect it for Christians?
Well, it's easier for me to answer the first question.
Okay.
I think that I'll take a stab at both. Okay. I think that when Jews are a persecuted minority, or even just a minority, let's say in America before very recently, it was difficult for Jews to enact all of the. Let me pause. Let me say it differently. There is a very strong relationship between the Jewish people, the Torah, the God of Israel, and the land of Israel. And without any of those components, we as a people cannot actualize our full potential. And part of our full potential means responding to the spiritual hunger of the rest of the world with Torah wisdom. And so being back in the land of Israel, since the creation of the state of Israel and anticipating the ultimate kingdom that will be restored in the Messianic era to the Jewish people in the whole world coming from this place, we've got more of the pieces aligned. It's easier for us to do our job in the world because we are no longer scattered in other people's countries. So that's the answer to the first question. Regarding the question of how Israel plays for Christians, I think this is pretty standardly understood in Christian Zionist circles, and certainly by Jews who interact with Christians, and that is they saw clearly in history the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, that God was not finished with the Jewish people, that all of the promises that God made to the Jewish people regarding the land of Israel are still in effect, and that means that they had to make a paradigm shift. And that was, for many of them, one of the early stages of them coming closer to the Jewish people and to Torah and to the land of Israel and to the God of Israel.
Now, if I can just take it a step back, from the beginning, literally, we had a sin that was created by Adam, not Elio Berkowitz, his namesake, and we have a tradition that this all happened on the last day of the week, or right before the last day of the week, on Friday afternoon. This whole story happened, and if they were able to have continued through the Sabbath into the Sabbath, then that would have been the redemption. The redemption would have happened in the first week of creation, and due to the sin, we have been given different opportunities. Again, this is the Kabbalistic mystic version of it. We've been given different opportunities which we have failed at, and there is a set time at the end of days, which at that point is going to be the point of no return, where we're not going to have a choice but to go through this redemptive process. It's going to be difficult, hard, depending on how we pursue it. But clearly, if the first signs of redemption showed up before there was such a thing as a Jew on the planet, because Adam incorporated the souls of all humanity, then all of humanity would be necessary in order to rectify that original soul and that original sin in order to come back to that original redemptive period. Am I
So
mistaken?
I think you're making the same case that I made in much simpler terms when we first began speaking, which is that redemption is redemption for the whole world, and Mashiach, the Messiah, for whom we have been waiting, is the personality that is going to bring all of us into that messianic era. It means somewhat different things for Jews and non-Jews, but it's not like the Jews are going to be redeemed and the rest of the world is going to go on, shopping at Walmart and I don't know, watching Netflix. I mean, everything in the whole world is going to change to bring us in alignment with what God's original purpose was for the world. So yes, I totally agree with you.
It's funny you're saying it in that terms. You're talking about Geula and the process you're involved in, but the world is changing drastically every single day. We're in very turbulent times.
Yeah.
So this message is like, wake up and smell the coffee. Also,
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I don't want to mention his name because I didn't ask him. I don't have permission to do this, but I was speaking to somebody about the book who is mystically plugged in kind of person. And he said to me, I need to hurry up because the message he was giving me is that not only is this timely, but this book needs to be out there because, Higi Azman, like the time has arrived.
We're running out of time.
Right. For this conversation and for the shift that Jews and non-Jews both need to make in preparation for the Messianic era. And part of I see my role as a conversation starter. I look at certain patterns and I'm not the last word. I'm not the biggest expert. I'm just pointing out something shifting and people need to pay attention to that. And that's what the first book is about. And that's what the second book is about. It's not meant to be the definitive treatise on this topic. It's meant to be an introduction to the concept that Jews have a larger responsibility to the world, that God gave us that responsibility when he gave us the Torah, and that the time has come for us to step into that role.
I think it's absolutely time. I mean, you and I have been reporting on the Geula in the news, and it's just over the last 2-3 years, over the last year, things have just fast forwarded so much that I don't get questioned anymore. People look at my articles. I used to get questioned all the time. Oh, you're always saying this. This has always happened. People don't say that anymore because it's clear that something's happening. The way you described it also, it's interesting that just Israel, by virtue of the fact that it exists, is the physical manifestation that dispels replacement theology. So I feel like, it's like, how can you say replacement theology if against the laws of nature and history, the covenant was established. The covenant was not even reestablished. It's just it was manifested in the prophetic manner. That's very clearly true, and that I think a lot of Christians are reassessing that. I hope I'm not saying too much, but I know that you and people who also Jews who believe that we have a mandate to spread the light of Torah are frequently ostracized for this belief, and that it's after 2,000 years of building walls, it's Jews are incredibly reluctant to open the door, and I think as a person who I hope is also in this path, it is almost exclusively Israel, because if I'm in America, I'm so afraid. I'm afraid of the Christian persecution, and I'm afraid of assimilation. If I open my doors, what's going to happen to my grandchildren? Are they going to be Jewish? In Israel, we don't have that fear. We don't have the fear of assimilation. We don't have the fear of the existential threat. So it's much easier to open up the door, I think.
Yeah, I think people in Israel have a bit more confidence about the future of the Jewish people and the strength of the Jewish people. There's also the idea that when you move to Israel, your soul gets an elevation, not just a physical elevation, and that you're playing kind of in the big leagues now. And it is true, and I certainly have had my share of pushback and so forth, but I so believe that God is asking me to open this message, that I take the shots, because I can't not. It's just it is just part of my shlichut. It's part of my mission, and I think it doesn't even have to be this topic. Any new idea gets its share of detractors and pushback and so forth. So,
well, I think especially that's especially true in Judaism, since Judaism has been totally like we've built up walls so as not to change in the slightest bit. And I think the return to Israel not only changed us in this respect of how we should be, we have a mitzvah, we have a commandment to be a light unto the nations, but I think in so many regards, the return to Israel has required a change in Judaism. It used to be that we were seeking to emulate the Judaism of Poland in the 18th century, but the land of Israel is not Poland. Judaism itself is changing and has to change in order to be proper Judaism in the land of Israel. And I think, I'm sorry, yeah.
The nations of the world are part of that change, that it is not something that we do in isolation. It's something that we do, as I said before, in cooperation with the nations of the world that are looking to engage with us. I'm not talking about standing on the street corner and trying to recruit. I'm talking about people who are turning their faces to Israel, turning their faces to the Jewish people already of their own volition, and that we as a people need to be prepared to respond to that. That is part of our godly mission.
I remember, and it affects even the way you understand or even remember the Bible. I remember when I reread the section about Solomon consecrating the temple, and like the third or second thing he said was, may you please hear the prayers of the foreigners who come here. And I had never remembered reading that before, and there it was, black on white.
So the chapter that I'm working on about these universal messages that I found, like once my eyes were open, it's there. I didn't make it up. I'm just shining a light and saying, look, you guys, in all over Tanakh, God is telling us that we are meant to have a relationship with the rest of the world. And I'm saying, I'm not the only one saying it, but I'm saying I believe that now is the beginning of the time, because the nations of the world, look at the Abraham Accords. It's a beginning. We're not in full-blown redemption yet, and but we're beginning to see signs that there are people who are not Jewish who want, for various reasons, who want to be on good terms with the Jewish people, who want to learn from the Jewish people, and that is our responsibility to share with the rest of the world.
I just want to say, you mentioned the Abraham Accords. There was one young Bahraini minister, a young woman. She was like the youngest minister in any government, in charge of youth affairs. And she had learned in some serious schools. One of them was in New York. She had learned in New York at a university for graduate studies. And she used to go to Shabbos with her Jewish friends. And here was this Bahraini minister sitting in Bahrain, not Bahrain, Bahrain or the UAE. UAE. Oh. She was sitting in Dubai saying that Shabbos has a lot to teach them. Not that she should keep Shabbos. She was a devout Muslim woman, but that she had a lot to learn from Shabbos. And to think that someone would, that an Orthodox Jew would close the door and say, no, I cannot shed the light of Torah on this person, I think it's unacceptable.
I
Well, it
think
has
one of
to
the
be done with
greatest
humility.
one of the greatest proofs that you can bring for a Torah Jew that prays 3 times a day. One of the highlights of the prayer, which we end with every prayer with, and is one of the highlights of our High Holy Day prayers, is the prayer of Aleinu. And it says, and all living flesh will call in your name to turn back to you all the wicked of the earth. They will recognize and will know, all the inhabitants of the earth, that to you, that every knee shall bow down and every tongue, and before you they will kneel and bow down and give honor to your glorious name, and they will all accept the yoke of your kingship and reign upon them speedily forever and ever. So it's very clear that this is a universal concept, not something just to the Jewish people.
And not a World Series of religions to see who gets the World Series cup or whatever they get.
So Josh, the quote that you just gave from the Aleinu prayer is also in the chapter, because again, once you start looking for it, I have dozens of examples of it. I know we're almost out of time, or we're whatever.
We're over. It's okay.
I just want to talk about the podcast that is related to the book, and just say something very briefly about that, if I may.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So as a journalist and as a Jew living in the land of Israel, I have developed relationships with people coming from Christian backgrounds who say the most incredibly heartwarming things about how being in relationship with Orthodox Jews, with Torah Jews, has changed them, and how, not to the point where they want to become Jewish, but how it has impacted them. And when they talk to me, and maybe they're sitting at my Shabbat table, or we're doing an interview or whatever, I often think, other people should hear this stuff. I think this would blow Jews' minds if they heard the kinds of things that the three of us hear on a somewhat regular basis from the kinds of people who are in fact ready to cooperate with the Jewish people for a godly purpose. And so I decided that a podcast might be a good opportunity to do that in conjunction with the book, to give them a chance. That's the first book. Can you show the cover of the forthcoming book?
Yeah, sure, if you get it to me.
I sent it to you. I'll send it to you again.
Okay.
To give other people an opportunity to hear the paradigm shift in the words of people from the nations. That if I say it, or Eliyahu says it, or that such a thing exists, that's one thing. But if you hear a Christian person speak about how much they cherish their relationship with the Jewish people that they know, how much they love the land of Israel, how much they recognize that the Jewish people have something to give them that will benefit them, I think that is really paradigm shifting for people. I know it was for me, and I want to share and amplify those voices. So I'm planning a podcast, thank you, to go along with the forthcoming book, Lighting Up the Nations, so that people understand what the impact of these relationships can actually be on real people.
That's a beautiful
Where
cover.
can they find your book?
Well, the book is not finished yet. It will certainly be available on Amazon, and in both hard copy and in a Kindle version. I'm hoping to 10 from the Nations is already available on Amazon, and I'm hoping that the book will be available by June, that the new book will be available by June.
It's a lot of work. God bless you, Rivka. So I think we have to go. I'd like to thank Rivka so much. I don't think people understand how she's way out on the edge, doing Hashem's work in the most intense way. And really bringing in a new era of cooperation, which is, I think, the word of the day. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Blessings are coming out from Israel all over the world to you. The teachings are going out from Zion like it's supposed to. Thank you so much for joining us. Be blessed. I don't have a show scheduled yet for tomorrow, but I'm hoping to bring you something special.
Stay tuned. Be well.